Welcome to the second episode of Trickiest line against the King's Gambit, where we are going to continue with the main line move, e captures d5, whereupon, rather than playing the old line stuff e4, I do recommend you go with the modern approach, starting with e captures f4, where black has created the first threat, namely queen to h4 check. So that, let's say if white ignore this and play a random move, d4, then the opening disaster is looming at the air, as the tactical point is, after g3, pawn takes g3 and knight to f3, black can sack his queen by playing g2 check, and after knight takes h4 and the move, pawn takes rook in the corner promoting a new queen. If we look at the end result, black clearly emerge with a piece advantage. So nope, white has to stop this nasty queen check by black, so accordingly knight to f3 is the only fitting reply here. And after this, we play knight to f6. Number 1, attacking this pawn. Number 2, reaching the most critical position of this amazing line. Well, as I have highlighted over here, white has 5 main choices, and amongst them 3 of them try to hang on to this pawn. But let's start where white plays some routine moves such as d4. Well, I'm afraid this is not good, as black can instantly get advantage with knight captures d5, and even though white has 2 choices, neither of them give any satisfied results. For example, more oftenly played move here is c4, which I'm afraid a big time mistake, as after bishop to b4 check. If bishop to d2, then we can play knight to e3 attacking the queen, and after some simple obvious moves, queen to e2, bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, and when black castle at this point, if you carefully look at this position, not only white cannot castle, but black has a threat of knight to c2 as well as rook to e8, and don't forget he is a clear pawn up. So this is a completely hopeless position for white, so that's why after this check white has to play king to f2. But in the opening your king has to move like this, then there is something really bad going to happen, and obviously black can play knight to e3, which push the king more on the center side. And I just like to show you one model game from the database where black simply play bishop to g4. White thought, okay, I can play bishop to e2, arrange the artificial castle, but it's too little too late, as knight to c6 pressurize the d pawn, and black has a very simple plan, namely queen check and castle on the queen side, where white king is feeling the big time hit. In fact, the game finished very quickly. White plays d5, black give this check, and after king to f2, indeed castle on the queen side, which pinned down the d pawn. And after knight to d2, trying to get the piece, black play a crafty move, rook to e8, whereupon some nasty tactics on there. So white thought that, okay, let me get the king out as quickly as possible with rook to e1. But what has been missed out is, after just 2 moves, white resigned the game. Can you see it? Go ahead and pause the video I'm showing you right now. Queen to e3 check, king to f1, and now this wonderful deciding blow, bishop to c5, where mate is unavoidable for the white. Okay, the second most popular choice here is bishop to c4. And against this, my recommendation is you start with bishop to e6, which has a very cute trap, and many people fall for this, that white cannot castle here. The simple reason is black has this amazing resource, knight to e3, which by force wins the exchange, after bishop takes e3, bishop takes e4, both of the white pieces are hanging. So when white saves the bishop, we take the rook, and at the end, what else? An exchange of at just 10th move of the game. So this is a nice trap which you should always look out in your blitz and the quick games. However, the accurate response is bishop takes c4, where white's idea is after queen takes d5, he wants to take the f4 pawn, but immediately taking on f4 is not possible, as few people fall for this because of this wonderful check and nabbing the bishop. So watch out for this tactic when queen is on the d5 square. Well, before capturing on f4, white has to castle. And even though database suggests that black should play bishop to d6, I don't like the position after knight to c3. So rather than going for all this, I recommend this simple approach, knight to c6. And when white get his pawn back, you can continue with castle on the queen side, putting the pressure on the d pawn, so c3 is almost forced here. But after that, this nice little move f6 gives black a hell lot of fun position, as you can see from the arrows, g5, h5 coming up very thick and fast. And although game is double-edged, if you run this position in any chess engine, it clearly favors the black. The second move I want to consider is knight to c3, whereupon we can simply take on d5. And funny enough, white has three different choices, but I'm afraid neither of them are working here. For example, if he plays the move d4, then we can play bishop to b4, pinning down the knight. And after bishop to d2, what else? This simple sequence. Bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and now castle on the king side, where black has some obvious moves. Knight to e3 as well as rook to e8, and altogether with a pawn advantage, this is already looking grim for the white camp. So no, d4 is a bad choice in these positions. What about other choice? If your opponent continue with knight takes d5, then you can simply recapture with the queen. And the point is, after d4, you don't need to play the favorite database choice bishop to d6. Rather, bishop to e7 is most accurate choice. Because white is not threatening here bishop takes f4 due to this check which we have already seen so far. So that is right out of the equation. And overall, black has a very simple plan. He wants to play g5 and hang on to this extra pawn. So for example, a sample line can go like this. c4, queen to d6, bishop to d3, planning to castle, where we can first pin down this knight, and after castle, indeed play g5, where black has to follow a very simple theory. Take out the knight, castle on the queen side, and with extra pawn, you get some good attack on the white king. So last but not least, what happens if your opponent continue with moves such as bishop to c4, which is highestly played here. But this is again not working in this position because of knight capture c3, and it doesn't matter however white recapture. Let's say b capture c3 is database top choice. Against both of this move, black will hold on to his extra material with bishop to d6. And castle, castle, what else? A clear material advantage for the black. Okay, so let's look at some of the serious options by the white, where white really want to hold on to this extra material. And amongst them, the most popular choice from the database is to play c4. Looks very impressive, right? Well, guess what? Against all of these three options, my recommendation is very simple, and you are going to remember the theory in a very effective manner. First, you can play c6, attacking the d5, and obvious enough, white has to take it. Well, there are some games starting with d4, but I think after this, white get an IQP, which is a clear-cut target in the upcoming endgame, and the line goes like this. Bishop to b4 check. If bishop to d2, then we can exchange the bishop. So knight to c3, and now you can take on d5, allowing white to capture his pawn back, but then we can castle on the king side, and the big point is when white moves the bishop, we can take on c4, gaining one important tempo. And not only that, after bishop takes c4, if you carefully look at the position, white get an horrible weakness on the d file, and on top of everything we have a forcing sequence which goes as follow. Knight to d5, double attack. White has to play bishop to d2. Now you give this check, so white bishop has to go back. Now you take on c3, and after pawn takes c3 and the move queen to e7, just carefully look at this position, guys. Not only white has some horrible pawn structure, but his king stuck in the center, and sooner or later black can exploit these factors in his favor with some careful play. For example, one of my recent game, my opponent plays c4 here, and after my bishop to d7, he thought, hang on, he blundered a piece, so I will take it. But after my next move, white get the rude shock. Did you spot it? Bishop to a4, a deflection move, and poor white queen cannot move. Well, he tried bishop to b4, trying to give the piece back. But I was more than happy, as after queen captures b4 check, queen to d2 and queen to e7, once again the black threat remained as it is, as you cannot castle. But on top of everything, white has this time really horrible structure, and if you look at the engine evolution here, clearly it is black who can have a lot of fun in this line. Well, as per the database, the most popular choice is pawn takes c6, and now black can take back the pawn with the knight, whereupon d4 has been exclusively played here. Looks very natural, you are taking the center and attacking on f4, but in fact here fun begins for the black with this nice tactical move, bishop to g4, where he has targeted the d pawn. Okay, white has two choices, and amongst them, once again, d5 is by far most popular choice. But I'm afraid this is a huge mistake, as after bishop takes f3, white has two choices, and both of them leads to disaster. First move, queen captures f3, a natural move, but leading to a high profile trap here, guys, as black has this forcing sequence. Knight to d4, double attack. White queen has to go on the d file. Now you play bishop to c5, allowing white to take back the pawn, but after our castle, threatening rook to e8, so white plays the move knight to c3, and when black gives this check, his idea is to play bishop to e2, so that his piece is well protected and he's ready to castle. Except one problem, that here black has a move which forced the resignation. The question is, can you find it? You are a genius if you see the move b5. What a move! And the idea is very simple. This is the only piece which is defending on e2. So by playing the move b4, we are dislodging it and getting a piece advantage. Okay, white has few options. For example, if he plays moves such as a3, then we can simply take on c4, forcing the queen to go away so that we can deliver this juicy fork. So that is right out of the equation. What about castle? Well, that straight away run into our tactic, that is b4, attacking two pieces. And last but not least, many of you says that, hang on, can't white just take this pawn and neutralize all black threats? Well, of course he can, except one problem, that now d5 pawn become weak and black can simply chop it off, which comes with a double threat, so that after bishop to d2, we can take on c3 and then take on e2 with a clear piece advantage. Well, apart from d5, white can also play bishop to e2 in this position. And his idea is, when black take this knight, he wants to recapture with the bishop, so that if you take on d4, then white bishop can take on b7. And yes, at first sight this looks cool, except one problem, that black has this lethal check, whereupon white is finding some really difficult time. For example, you cannot play queen to e2 due to d4 pawn hangs, and queen to e7, bishop e7, you cannot take on b7 as knight to c2 check. So most of the games continue with bishop to d1. But after this, black has a very simple task. Bishop to d6, protect the pawn castle with a healthy pawn advantage. So nope, queen to e2 is a big mistake here. What about king to f2? Well, this time around, we can castle on the queen side, setting yet another trap. And this has recently happened in my blitz game. My opponent thought, wow, I can take on c6, destroying black queen side, and now play rook to e1, where I am going to do artificial castle and everything is so good. But what he missed is, black has this nice shot, rook captures d4, and suddenly white is a complete pawn down for absolutely no compensation, as queen captures d4 run into this very nice tactic, knight to g4 check, king to f1, knight to h2 check, king to f2, and after queen check, when white king goes to e2, black has this winning move in the picture, f3, a double attack. So king has been detached from the rook, and after that, yup, what else, you can take it. And on top of white naked king, black has an outright passer, and altogether this is completely dominating position for black. One of my favorite trap occurs if your opponent continue with bishop to e2, as now you get this cute sequence, castle on the queen side, attacking on d4. In the majority of the games, white played the move d5. And after this, just look at this forcing sequence, guys. f3. White has to take it, otherwise he's going to lose a piece. And now, because the f pawn moved forward, the king become extremely weak. And exactly on this point, black can deliver this nasty knight sacrifice. Boom! What a move! And the thing is, after pawn takes d5 and this queen check, you cannot go to d5, so king to f1 is forced. And after this, I think white is completely losing with bishop to c5, where mating attack is unavoidable. And there is a game in the database where white plays king to g2, only to find the finishing touch, rook to d6, and what else? A beautiful miniature by the black.